I want to thank you for joining us tonight for the Mountain Zoom series. And this one tonight covers the White Oak Initiative and White Oak Management. And we have, is it Dr.?
Not even close.
Not even close, but highly knowledgeable about this subject, Darren Morris with the University of Kentucky Department of Forestry. And Darren, take it away.
All right, thanks. I've got too much stuff going here on my screen. All right, here we go. So the White Oak Initiative started up in 2017, and I know everyone on this Zoom presentation has heard of the White Oak Initiative. It's the word has gotten out, not necessarily everything that's going on, but that there is a White Oak Initiative and it's doing something, right? So the White Oak Initiative started because we found out there was a problem with white oak. And the problem with white oak is that it's not regenerating. So the goal of the White Oak Initiative is to ensure the long-term sustainability of white oak, right? White oak's beneficial to a lot of different entities, not just foresters and landowners. And white oak also covers a large part of the eastern United States. White oak happens to have the largest range of all the upland oaks. Actually, white oak encompasses the ranges of pretty much all the other upland oaks that grow along with white oak. So, in other words, when you manage for white oak, you're also doing good things for upland oak forests in general. The White Oak Initiative is a partnership thing. It's the network, those interested, not only landowners, foresters, but also industries, distilleries, of course, conservation organizations, state and federal governments are all a part of the White Oak Initiative. The steering committee is made up of a diverse group just the same. It's not just foresters and landowners. It's there are a lot of companies, some international, that generate a lot of support and a lot of movement when we do white oak things. The state partners really kind of are going to drive this. As y'all know, it's the state forestry departments, along with the extension programs within each state, and of course, consulting foresters will help move this white oak and white oak management quite a bit. So, are y'all seeing my chat? Are you seeing my screen okay?
We are. It's
Okay.
not advancing. We're just seeing the one initial slide.
Okay. So, not sure why it was not advancing there. I'm going to try to pull it back up.
That has happened before, so this is not anything new. Occasionally, there's a computer glitch.
Right. All right, are we advancing?
Yes, that fixed it.
Okay, so the White Oak Initiative is this is the steering committee members. As you can see, a lot of entities involved, a lot of international companies. This is the list of partners, the state partners I'm talking about. All the states participate, U.S. Forest Service as well, Association of Consulting Foresters, all important in white oak management. This is a heat map that shows the white oak dominated forests. So the big part, what we call the sourcing region, is kind of right around all of us. The Appalachian Mountain area. In Missouri, you can see there's a lot, white oak is well represented. But it's also all four corners of the eastern United States. And white oak's important everywhere it grows. This is more of a heat map zoomed into our area. And this is a representation of the white oak throughout our forests. And it's well represented pretty much everywhere, especially in the Appalachian region, and then in Tennessee, and then out west towards the Ozarks. This information has begun to reach landowners, and what landowners are finding out is that there's some kind of issue with regeneration. Researchers have known for over 30 years that white oak's not regenerating enough to replace the forests as we know them now, which is a problem. If we don't have the regeneration there now, as we grow our forests, it's going to show 50 years down the road with reduced numbers of white oak. Industry is finding out, flooring, stave, cooperages, bourbon distilleries, they're concerned. That's their livelihood. And of course, they're all competing for white oak in their wood products. And it's important that we continue to maintain that, which is why conservation groups, wildlife biologists, and others are concerned as they provide forest management to mostly landowners. Landowners are the majority of the ownership in our eastern United States forests. And white oak is a cornerstone species. So as we manage for white oak, we're doing good things for the upland oak forests. So what about the future supply of white oak? If we don't have the regeneration, what does that mean? Find your state. This is the removals by state. In 2015 and 2016, Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky, right there at the top. That doesn't mean that white oak isn't just as important to those landowners in Iowa, right? So regardless of where the state's positioned on this little graph, white oak's still important. But this is kind of the sourcing area. The far, the 6 states to the left, that's sort of the main sourcing region of where the white oak supplies the industry. And here's the problem, that right now we have 79% of the saw timber white oak as saw timber size trees. Look to the right, only 4% of these forests have seedlings and saplings. So that's a big difference. There's not, the regeneration's not there. We'll look at it a different way. So this is a stand age distribution of white oak. And at the bottom is how old that stand is. So look at the bar in the middle. That's 61 to 70-year-old forests. The white oak in that stand are 61 to 70 years old. And as you can see, that's how we've charted this. So on the far left, the 0 to 10-year-old white oak, there's barely 300,000 acres in the entire region. So although we have abundant saw timber of white oak right now, that's where we're getting it. That's on the right side of the chart. That's on the chart where it's 60 to 120 years old. And by the way, the average stave log age that goes in to make a bourbon barrel is about 100 years old. That's about how long it takes. Yeah, you could speed management up as fast as possible and maybe do it in a minimum of 75 years. But it's a 100-year-old process to, get a white oak and other oaks to the point where they're ready to be harvested. This is where our regeneration's coming from, and it's greatly been reduced. So it's not there. That's a problem. The harvest that we've done over the last 30 to 40 years have not been regenerating in young stands, which is an issue. Oaks aren't regenerating like they did in the past. As time passes, the chart here slides to the right, and it's replaced with this. So 50 years down the road, this is a projected look of what the oak forests are going to look like. So it's a big reduction in white oak. White oak's not going extinct. We're not going to lose it, but the forest will change as we know them in the course of 50 years if we don't do something. The projected loss is 77% reduction in white oak. So here's that loss in the form of a bar chart. The blue bars are the current white oak numbers out there in our forests. 50 to 60 years, almost 4 million acres, 60 to 70, 61 to 70 years, 5 million acres. But that same 5 million acres in 50 years will be reduced to less than 500,000. So why do we have white oak forests there? Well, really, 100 years ago, we treated the ground rough. It's the way we farmed, the way we, did grazing and wildfires and all that kind of led to benefit the oaks because the way oaks sprout. So historically, the grazing and the wildfires and the harsh treatment kept those maples and the beech back. As fire and grazing decreased, the shade tolerant species like maples and beech that can handle that shade sort of took over where the white oak regeneration should be. Now you see it quite often where maples, beech, and others predominate the understory and they shade out the small oaks. So when a harvest occurs, the oaks aren't there or they're too small and they get out competed by this faster growing shade tolerant maples and other things. So the forest we have now that we're harvesting in right now, we're managing in, the mature forests were regenerated in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, when things were vastly different in the way that we harvest timber and manage our forests. So what does that mean? So we're harvesting white oak. We're not growing it as fast, or we're not replacing it as fast within the age classes of our forest. So what does that mean? The red areas on this map are areas where white oak is being harvested faster than it's growing. The dark green areas are areas where white oak is growing faster than it's being harvested. And that's all grades. That's the good stuff, and that's the near junk, the pulpwood, and all of it. So what you notice about this map is that the red area where it's being harvested more than it's growing, it's not in any particular location. It's just kind of scattered out fairly evenly across the entire range of white oak. So there's nothing in particular that's making it happen. It's not industry related or location related or site related. It's just that white oak is desirable and it's being harvested. So get your brain around this. The red line is the part where harvesting and growth are an even ratio. That's where it breaks even. You're harvesting exactly as much as you're growing right along this red line. Notice where the grade 1 log is on white oak, the veneer, the stave log, the high quality lumber is not growing as fast as it's being harvested because it's under the red line. So that's a problem. That's regionally wide white oak harvest and growth. Stave lumber, grade 2 stuff, a little bit better. it's not a good situation, but at least it's growing a little bit faster than it's being harvested. And of course, the lower quality trees, the grade 3 and the grades 4, are growing faster than they're being harvested, probably because they're not as desirable in the market. This is another graph that shows how white oak inventory relates to harvesting. There are two things going on here. The top bar, the blue bar at the top, shows white oak growth projected over the next 50 years. So that's what, if we leave it alone, this is what's going to happen. White oak continues to grow. The trees that we have out there in our forests are continuing to get bigger. However, at the bottom, you see the green harvest line and the red growth line representing white oak. And somewhere in around 2058 to 2060, that red growth line drops below the harvest line. So all the white oak, grades 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, at that point, we'll be harvesting them faster than we're growing them. So let's break down the grade 1 stuff, okay? The high quality white oak, the stave log, the grade 1 lumber, the veneer. So first of all, right now, we're already cutting it faster than we're growing it because it's on the decline. And the red line, which represents the growth line, is well under the green harvest line. And that green harvest line, the reason there are 3 of them, there are dotted lines, those represent the most harvested year and the least harvested year. That's due to market stuff, you know. So the solid green line in the middle is just an average of that. And that's about as good as we can get. So we just take that harvest line and project it forward for 50 years. And the blue line at the top is your white oak. And that, as we go, that just declines fairly steadily. This is for grade 1. Here's grade 2. You see the same decline over the next 50 years. We're growing it, but we're not growing it as fast as we're harvesting. The grade 1 line it's a steeper decline, as you can see, than the grade 2 is, but both are in decline. This is kind of interesting. This is grades 3 and 4 and 5, whatever a 4 and a 5 is. That's the one hollow or whatever. But we're actually growing the grade 3 logs faster than we're harvesting them. And we don't get caught up really within the 50-year period. So we're going to continue to grow the lower quality stuff faster than we're harvesting it. This is for grade 4 and 5, the next one that was added. So picture that for a second. We're growing the low quality white oak faster than we're harvesting it, but we're not growing the high quality stuff near as fast. So that means what happens to the forest, right? It's becoming lower and lower quality as we go on. So what do we do about it? We've got to fix this. We've got to fix this issue with the regeneration. So we've got to make sure that we grow this regeneration and get it to the next size level. We got to establish the regeneration. So how do we do that? Well, the White Oak Initiative worked with oak researchers, states, U.S. Forest Service, and developed a list of oak practices, oak-friendly practices that will be necessary to cover any age, forest site condition so that we can address this problem. Each practice, there happen to be 10 of them. That includes tree planting, afforestation, but each practice is designed to do something specific. You don't just implement a practice and create a healthy forest area. Your goal is to do something specific. So the reason I added and how they affect forests to the title is because, there's no management practice that just creates the healthy forest. It actually affects it a certain way. Maybe there's no regeneration. So you've got to get some oaks there on the ground somehow, or maybe it's there, but it's too small. So you got to advance that regeneration so that it can compete with everything else, because we know how fast do white oaks grow. Well, they happen to grow slower than most of the other upland oaks. So for each practice, there's something specific. What does the practice do? What's the problem or issue with the forest that indicates a possible need for the practice? And what's the desired goal after the practice completion? Obviously, it's to solve the problem, right? Or the issue. So what's that goal? So the first practice is soil scarification. What does soil scarification do? So if you don't have any oak regen, it gets oaks there. It gets the oak regeneration into the forest floor as a 1-year-old little seedling. So what it really does, it creates conditions where the acorns have a better chance of making direct soil contact through the thick layers of the leaves, and thus successfully germinate into a new seedling. The problem or issue with the forest that indicates a need for soil scarification is what? There's no oaks in the forest understory, and a harvest is coming soon, right? So if you harvest and there's no oaks, you're done. You've killed the oak component in that forest because oaks aren't going to catch up. So the problem needs to be fixed. You need to get some oaks there into the understory, which means that you need to make sure that the acorns make contact with the soil. So this is a forest that has few or no oaks in the understory. It's planned to be harvested in about 10 years. If the landowner proceeds with the harvest without addressing the lack of oak regeneration, the oak component will be lost or greatly reduced in the forest, which is a problem. So this practice involves a dozer and a rake blade. And basically you just drive that thing around and it turns the leaf litter and the soil over on the top 4 inches, which you obviously do this in a good bumper crop year. Acorns you need to check the trees, make sure you have acorns on the trees, that it's not a failed acorn year as we sometimes see. And then as soon as the acorns drop, then you go in there with a dozer and a rake blade and you twist and move and spin around in between the mature trees and turn this soil over, and you improve the contact with the soil for the acorns, which is necessary to be successfully germinated. So notice the difference in the forest floor, the leaf litter where the dozers passed. Now you've got acorns that are in direct contact with the soil. You've improved your chances of germination. Hopefully next spring you come back and you see several hundred tree oaks per acre that have germinated. That's what we want. Another practice is called a mid-story removal. So the mid-story removal is one that develops already existing oak regeneration. The problem with, and why you might use this, is that existing oak regeneration is too small. So maybe it's only 10 inches tall. It's not going to compete. It doesn't have enough leaves. It's not vigorous enough, and it's not going to compete. So the goal is to remove a dense mid-story that's hampering these forest floor oak trees and let them to develop into advanced regeneration. So this is a mid-story removal. Notice that the canopy trees remain intact, but the understory, the non-oaks in the understory are removed, which allows just enough sunlight to come in and hit these oaks in the understory and grow them. We want them waist high. We want them 4 feet tall with more leaves, so that whenever we take the top off, we come back and harvest, in other words, they have a good head start. They have a good root system. They're vigorous, and they're going to be able to outcompete other competition. And this process takes 3 or 4 years. So once you have suitable advanced regeneration, the oaks will be in much better condition to compete. say in the event of a timber harvest or any other disturbance, if it's a tornado or a storm or an ice storm or whatever, the oak regeneration's there and it's ready to take off. Enhancement planting is also for areas without proper advanced regeneration. It provides an immediate increase of oak into the forest floor in order to supplement hopefully some oak that's already there in the form of advanced regeneration. And you add to that and enhance your numbers. So the problem is, if you need an enhancement planting practice, is that you just don't have enough advanced regeneration. Maybe you have 10 or 20 trees per acre and you need 100 or whatever. Every forest stand is going to, be different. But the goal is to provide additional advanced regeneration by planting high quality oak seedlings so that the total amount of regeneration is sufficient to continue this forest as a healthy oak forest. Enhancement planting is the planting of high quality, vigorous tree seedlings, usually bare root, not always, that immediately become advanced regeneration. You're putting a tall tree seedling with a lot of healthy leaves on it, and you're planting it, and it's immediately advanced regeneration, and it acts as such, and the following year can begin to compete with other competition and eventually grow to become a mature tree of the forest. Site prep for regeneration practice creates optimal growing conditions for existing oak regeneration, usually following a harvest. And the issue that you might need, that might bring you to believe that you need a site prep regeneration practice, is that you have oaks in the understory, but they're overtopped by unmerchantable low quality trees or undesirable trees. And often this dense layer of vegetation will slow the growth and development of oaks, which are underneath, and they're just not going anywhere until you get this other vegetation off the top of it. So the goal is to remove the undesired trees and the other vegetation and thus release the desired oak regen, allowing oaks to continue to grow and thrive. So immediately before or maybe after a harvest, low quality oak vegetation, low quality vegetation, who knows what it is shading out the oaks in the understory. So oaks are out there. They're out there on the ground. You just can't see them because of the other junk that's left after the harvest in this case, and it needs to be removed to get the full sunlight down to the oaks. So this layer could be 12 inches or even more, and thus it could require a chainsaw or herbicide treatment through foliar spray, maybe cut stump application, or another spray and injection method. Depends on the site. After the vegetation's removed, the herbicide's taken effect, the sunlight hits the oaks that were hidden underneath, and now they can respond. All right, prescribed fire. Prescribed fire is kind of a tricky one. It's a fairly versatile tool, but at the same time, it does require a focus on a specific goal. So the first thing you should be aware of is that researchers are still working out the deals of when and exactly prescribed fire can be used to overcome specific oak regeneration problems. Having said that, when properly applied and timed, this practice definitely has the potential to aid in enhancing oak regen. It reduces the dense leaf litter that can impede the oak germination and also cause acorns to not survive the winter. It can also reduce logging debris, kill small undesired trees and vegetation that are left after a harvest maybe. Usually the problem or issue that leads you to perhaps consider prescribed fire is that oak regeneration is being impeded in some way. So the goal is to create conditions that allow for the oak regeneration to become established and or continue to grow. So this is a this is a possible prescribed fire that maybe you just need to burn to see what you've got in there, because it's hard to get in a forest like that and maneuver around to find, you know, the conditions and all that, and implement management strategies. So maybe you use a prescribed fire, in this case after a harvest, several years after a harvest, just to get in there and have access to it. They're not always like that. Some prescribed fires aren't always meant to be hot. So in other words, the timing of the fire can reduce the damage to acorn crops if you have a different forest situation than my first picture, and focus on removing species more susceptible to fire. In this case, as you can see by the leaves on the trees, this fire is a little bit different timing, and it's meant to be a cool fire, and you know, not damage existing trees. So this is a picture before the prescribed fire that's meant to reduce leaf litter depth, which is going to favor oak germination and sprouting from existing oak seedlings that are already in the understory. This is the same picture, same location after the fire, actually while the fire is moving through, and undesirable seedlings are reduced in a situation like this. And of course, oaks, being sprouters like they are fine sprouting back. So here's the before and here's the after. And you know, it's a pretty calm, low-key burn, but it does have a purpose. Crop tree release is one that y'all probably know. That's the practice that you can actually choose which trees continue to grow and become mature. So the forest owner can focus dollars and attention specifically to trees that are desired species and that they'll respond well to whatever treatment that you're doing. The problem or issue is that if you don't do this practice, then trees will become stagnated. They're too dense. The canopies aren't forming the way that they should. You know, we want to grow our oaks tall and straight for the first 20 or 30 years maybe, and then all of a sudden you've got to give those canopies room to grow and become larger. So crop tree release is the release of often pole-sized trees. When these young forests are becoming dense, as you can see in the picture, there are too many of them, and it's time to maybe thin them out and let the crown develop, continue. So you can choose which trees. The canopy view of this same area, and actually these same three trees in the picture, if you see the larger oak trees, that's them. And so these oaks no longer have room to expand the crowns, and we need to widen those crowns, more crown space, more leaves, more photosynthesis, and therefore more diameter growth of the trunk, and more importantly, you know, the tree continues to compete well, because otherwise you might lose it. If it's the only white oak out in a forest and you don't implement a crop tree release practice, the next 10 or 20 years, the white oaks is more than likely going to be overgrown and you'll just lose it in the stand. So after practice completion, this is kind of what you're looking at. You have space in between your crop trees now. That means in the next 5 to 10 years, more leaves can be added on, branches grow laterally, your crown develops better, which is what you want, which means faster growth. This is a white oak stump after the harvest that shows a cross-section cut. So notice early on in the life of this white oak, the very tight growth rings. So it had many years of slow growth The red circle marks the point where the tree had a crop tree release practice implemented, and almost immediately it responded with more vigorous growth. The crown developed, and you got more diameter growth, which was very productive for this tree. So that's kind of the goal, right? So techniques for harvesting timber was also a part of the White Oak Initiative management, right? It's not just growing forest, it's also harvesting forests. So there are 3 that were included in the assessment and conservation plan. Those are 2H deferment harvest, group opening harvest, and a shelterwood establishment harvest. They're all similar in that they answer the same 3 questions. What do these practices accomplish? Well, they're designed to create ideal conditions for further development of oak, advanced regeneration, and recruitment into larger size classes as the new forest grows and matures. The problem or issue that might lead you to consider one of these harvest methods is that management work has been done prior to the harvest. Oak conditions aren't ready. As I've gone over with the previous practices, if you don't have regeneration, the harvest is going to result in a loss of the oak component in the future. That's just the way it is. Oaks, they just aren't good at catching up. So, of course, and some practices can be implemented after the harvest, but it's just more challenging. If you get in there before the harvest and you get your advanced regeneration established, you're ahead of things. This is a 2H deferment after the fact. 2H deferment is when all the timber is harvested except for perhaps 10 to 15 reserve oak trees. And these oak trees are usually spaced 50 to 60 feet apart, depending on the size of the trees within the stand. And of course, they're capable of producing acorns, which is good. The idea for the oaks is for the oak seedlings to develop under and in between these trees as we continue to grow this forest for another probably 60 plus years. And that creates 2 distinct age classes, because then you have your young seedlings as they grow and mature. These reserve trees are also growing and becoming large saw timber. So it creates 2 age classes, thus the 2H deferment. And basically it means that you're deferring the harvest of these trees that are left until the next crop rotation, which is decades into the future. And by doing so, you're able to really lifeboat the oak component into the future. For another 80 years, you're ensuring that oaks are still in the stand. You're getting acorns produced and hopefully developing a young story of oaks in the understory to continue development and management with those. That's a 2H deferment. The next one is the group selection. So notice the openings in this forest. This is a group selection, a group opening harvest or gap harvest. The idea is that the group openings are created by cutting all trees. They're like little mini clear cuts, and they're also about 150 feet wide. And researchers found out through studying this that 150 feet size is just about ideal for oak development. And it's because of the intermediate shade tolerance of white oak. It's too shady for yellow poplar, for instance, to come in and grow like yellow poplar grows, because it will outcompete the oaks. But it's just shady enough to where the oaks can develop and grow, but it's not too sunny. And of course, the lateral area, the edges of these 150 feet size openings also create the same conditions. You've got that moderate light condition around the edges of all these, where it benefits oak regeneration and oak regeneration development. The third and final practice is a shelterwood establishment harvest. This is where about 50% of all the overstory mature trees are harvested, leaving 50%, at least for a while, behind to help shelter the oak regeneration development. So the harvest can't be implemented if there's no oak regeneration in the understory. If you don't have that, then you've got to back up and do a practice like mid-story removal to enhance that regeneration into advanced regeneration. So once it gets to advanced regeneration size, then you implement the shelterwood establishment cut, and the trees left behind continue to shelter this oak regeneration by limiting sunlight in the stand, so that faster growing competition can't do that, can't become established and grow faster than the oaks. So you shelter the regeneration for possibly 8 to 10 years, maybe up to 15 or even more. And then an important part of this process is to come back and cut the trees that were left. That's the final cut. The oak regeneration has at this point been established and is well on its way to becoming, the next size class in the component of this forest. Questions? I went over a lot, I know. And
I had a question, Darren, when it comes to the scarification that you started.
yeah,
When you go in and churn the ground up like that, are you not doing damage to the roots of your parent trees? Or are you
so
not going deep enough to harm most of them?
yeah. So, and the idea behind that really is a lot of times in those stands, as they did the research on this, they found out that some of those trees, that the maples, for instance, that are in the understory 8 to 10 inches, the rake blade of the dozer goes just enough to knock those back, but not the mature trees, not the 18-inch, 14, 16, 18-inch trees. So there is a point there. It requires a skilled user, an operator, and no, it does not do harmful effects if implemented properly.
Other question has to do with the seedlings. I know you all are working on like the enhanced genetics, and we've had a lot of questions by clientele that want to know, when are those seedlings going to be available? And I know that this is a long-term thing, but that's a question we keep getting. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. So they this project is creating a lot of white oak seed sources. So these plantations, these white oak plantations are going in, but they're going in, not only to study the characteristics and the traits and to figure out which white oaks grow best in which location, because there will be plantation locations where the parent tree that was selected because of its high quality will be grown in 4 different locations within the eastern United States. So it's not just around Kentucky, it's Pennsylvania and Arkansas, and everywhere is going to be represented as far as possible white oaks that grow better in different conditions. And then at the same time, these acorns are being collected that are being outplanted in the form of plantation nurseries for the goal of producing seed source in 15 years. With a grafted white oak tree, some of them will start producing acorns in 10 years, but think about it, it's going to be 8 feet tall, so it's only going to produce 3. So until you get good canopy development, really it's 15 years and really 25 years before you start getting a good number of acorns from these nurseries or seed sources. But at that point, like, in 15 years, we'll be well on our way to not having to go out into a forest and rake through leaves and scrounge around for white oak acorns. I know. I mean, it takes for a state nursery to grow that for a state nursery around in our area to grow enough white oak acorns to provide to landowners the following year. I mean, it takes 4,000 pounds of acorns. So, and that's a lot, so it's going to benefit us a lot when they do come to the point in 15 years when we're able to go out there under a nicely mowed location and just rake those things up.
So I've got one last question, then I'll shut up and let other people ask, but these are all questions that I had. I know that the white oaks, the germination or the production, they're naturally like biennial bearers, but they're erratic even in that. They do not put on a good crop every 2 years. Sometimes it can be 4 or even 8 years in between bumper crops. So has there been any research into, other than weather, what that's attributed to? Is any of that genetic? Is it something that we could select for trees that are more dependable bearers, so that in the long run, maybe they do a better job of replacement?
Yeah. So there are more dependable bearers out there. That some of that may be genetics, some of that may be a site location issue. It's definitely weather related. And it's definitely embedded in the white oak that lives for 400 years and absolutely has sort of established itself as not caring whether or not it makes an acorn every year, right? So that kind of makes sense, but it's in the mix with everything you just said, and that may come out. And of course, when you graft trees, one thing that happens is they start producing acorns sooner, and in 15 years, it may very well be that they're starting to tag some of these characteristics out in the plantations as how many acorns are being produced each year, and that it's fairly steady every year with 2 or 3 of these, which they'll continue to monitor. So, one thing it's important to note with the genetics program, they're not seeking traits. As far as, you could have, you could have traits that come out in a handful of trees that they like the way chemically that the white oak is made, as in bourbon production. Or it could be acorn size, and it could, or a steady, more reliable acorn crop from year to year, instead of that, 1 or 2 out of 10 year acorn thing that we all kind of have to just accept. So hopefully improvements can be made there.
Very good. Folks, if you've got questions that you want to ask Darren, just unmute yourself and ask away.
So while people are thinking, so during this white oak initiative, early few years, with the grant, we do have deliverables. One of them was the assessment and conservation plan, which is a 60-page book on, a little bit of the history of white oak, what's going on with it, and everything within the assessment and conservation plan, the strategies, how we're putting all that together. And, you can look at that right now at the White Oak Initiative website. It's whiteoakinitiative.org. White Oak Initiative, White Oak whiteoakinitiative.org. I think. So it's in the chat. Also on the whiteoakinitiative.org website is the Landowners for Oaks series. And the Landowners for Oaks series are designed to make sure that we don't leave the landowner behind in all this, because I mean, all of us on this Zoom meeting know there's some things going on with White Oak, and that's going to be a problem, but not necessarily landowners. So, one of the Landowners for Oak series is just understanding the importance of White Oak, and all these were written specifically for landowners to bring them up to where we are, to understanding with what's going on. That White Oak it's cultural, it's a slow grower, it's liked by all. The acorns are eaten by most animals more than any other tree, so it's got a lot of battles, and it's important also from a lot of different standpoints. A lot of people like White Oak for different reasons. And then also you've got the regeneration problem. So challenges of oak regeneration is another Landowners for Oaks public series, which goes into the shade tolerance of oak, the 1 year out of 10 where acorns are produced, and what do you do about that? And then also the 10 practices that I just went over. So there are 3 Landowners for Oaks publications that you can access and get out to your landowners, and just sort of say, hey, this is what's going on right now. If you have further questions, contact whoever. And of course, it's not just White Oak. So there are 8 of the upland oaks. There are upland oak fact sheets about each species, White Oak, but then also black oak, northern red oak, southern red oak, chinkapin oak, chestnut oak, post oak, and scarlet oak. Those are the 8 upland oaks, and you can download them. There's a place on the bottom left. We've got the University of Kentucky logo. Then on the bottom left, there's kind of a blank spot available for others to put their logo, their state, or whatever, and get those out. So that's what they're for.
If you are bashful about asking questions verbally, feel free to type those in the chat box.
This is Tanya Caliphate. I have a quick question. So we just purchased a section of land that's all forest, and it does have some white oak on it. But is this something that, and we just got our farm number, so we're looking at different agencies that can maybe come out. Is this something that the forestry agents would come out and kind of do an assessment for the White Oak initiative, or does that not qualify?
So yes, you qualify. It's it's not going to be an assessment for the White Oak Initiative. The White Oak Initiative is there to provide everybody as much White Oak information as we can. So now it comes down to your either your county extension agent is a good one to contact, your local state forester, or a forester from the Association of Consulting Foresters. Get them out there, get them on the phone first of all, because a lot of times you can get management advice that at no cost, and they can walk around the forest with you and help you prepare a plan based on your goals and objectives, which may be a healthy, diverse white oak forest or whatever, and then you can move forward at that point.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Darren. I think, Tanya, I think you're in my county, right?
I am in your county.
Yeah,
Yes.
I thought so. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, just to follow up, happy to go out, and then we can get you in touch also with Danny Osborne, our regional forester, and he's an excellent resource, and we're happy to come out and look and do some inventory as well. So let's get in touch, and you just kind of give me a ring or shoot me an email, and we're happy to kind of move forward with that and do anything we can to help.
Okay, great. I'll do that. I'll get in touch with you. Thank you. Thanks for putting this on.
Any others?
So the next step, we've got the Landowners for Oak series published on the website. The next step, which is soon to happen, and man, COVID just killed us. When that came in, we had everything rolling, and then all of a sudden, bam. But I'm talking about the technical trainings for foresters, which will be online. Foresters, forest managers, wildlife biologists, it's not necessarily just foresters, but foresters will need to take it to, get a certificate thing at the end of it. And basically it's just going to be an all-inclusive training. We're going to go over all the oak practices, but not just that, it helps everybody get on board with the newest updated language. Things change over the years. The way that you name things and call things. So, the latest research has been incorporated, and researchers actually wrote these technical practices that will be released to foresters hopefully pretty soon. And then there'll be an online web-based training as well. So that'll be forthcoming this year.
Very good. Well, if there's no other questions, folks, we appreciate you joining us. And Darren, we especially thank you for taking the time to provide the presentation and excellent information. If you have any other questions about the initiative, I think Darren posted that down in the chat with the whiteoakinitiative.org. And otherwise, you can feel free to contact your county extension agent, and we can put you in touch with the folks at UK.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, Shad.
Thank you, and hope everyone has a good evening. And I think that'll do. Have a good evening.
See ya.